centers as well as here in the Abuja studios. From my Ibadan studio, we have the founder and CEO of Acido Foundation, Dr. Jibril Abdul Malik. He's a psychiatrist. Dr. Abdul Malik, pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
All right, and also here with us in the Abuja studios, we'd like to welcome Chinyere Udensi, who's a clinical psychologist. Chinyere, pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, and Kirian, we have another guest with us. Yes.
Yes, so we have joining us here in Abuja is, of course, to mention Chinyere Udensi, who is here with us. And then from our Makurdi studio is Dr. Matthias Oyigeya. Matthias Oyigeya is the former Chief Medical Director, Federal Medical Center, Makurdi, Benue State. He is a consultant psychiatrist. It's a pleasure to have you this morning on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here too.
So let's begin the conversation by going over to our Ibadan Network Center, where we are introduce Dr. Jibril Abdul Malik. Dr. Abdul Malik, just for the benefit of our viewers, what is depression and how common is it in our country?
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigerians. Depression is a mood disorder. And let me start by saying that all of us as human beings, we have emotions. We think, we have memory, and so on. So our emotions, our mood, is never a straight line. It's something that fluctuates up and down for everybody. The only person that will have a straight line emotion will probably be a robot, not a human being. But these fluctuations, we all have good days, bad days. But these fluctuations usually is narrow. It's not something that, it doesn't fluctuate widely. We talk about abnormalities of mood. When your mood is very low, that's severity. So you feel extreme emotional pain, overwhelming feelings of sadness, and a host of other symptoms. That is one, there is severity. The second is that these symptoms that are so severe last for a long time, continuously. So it's not just good day, bad day. It's there consistently for a minimum of 2 weeks. And the third criteria that distinguishes normal fluctuation from clinical depression is that these symptoms that are severe, that are lasting for a long time, also affect your ability to function in your day-to-day life, at work, with your family, in your social interactions. So it impairs your ability to function normally. The other symptoms that you see in depression, apart from the overwhelming feelings of sadness, is feeling of tiredness, lack of motivation, difficulties with sleep, poor appetite, maybe feeling guilty for things they are not directly responsible for, and maybe having ideas about harming themselves, which we call suicidal thoughts, or crying for no reason, not having any interest at all, lack of motivation, having difficulties paying attention or concentrating. So you find that this long list, and there are more, are things that can occur to you and I, to many people at some point. What makes it different in clinical depression is that you have at least 5 of these symptoms occurring together at a severe level, and then lasting continuously for a long time, more than 2 weeks continuously, and affecting your ability to function in your day-to-day functioning. To end my response, depression is the commonest mental health problem globally. The World Health Organization estimates that about 350 million people at any point in time will be suffering from depression. That's double Nigeria's entire population. In Nigeria, it's also very common. And so since we know it's the commonest mental health problem, which may also be referred to as a silent killer, because I can be well-dressed and sitting in the studio and talking this way and be depressed. It's not written on the forehead. as against other types of mental health problems that even from the dressing and appearance, you will know something is not really right. So that's why we call depression the silent killer. So it's a very common problem globally as well as in Nigeria. It's the commonest mental health problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you indeed for your opening comment. We shall get back to you as we make progress in this conversation. Now, let's go to Benue State, where we have the Chief Medical Director, Federal Medical Center in Makurdi. Now, does someone's biology or genetic inheritance put him or her at a greater risk of being depressed?
Depression sometimes can be said to be familiar. Some other times it's said to be genetic. But what is obvious is that right from time, when people observed that people have depression, they are looking at endogenous. That is something coming from within. They could not find any good reason around the person that could make the person depressed. And then they classified depression at that time also could be exogenous. That is some events around the person that could have provoked the person feeling so low. And so studies have been done, and it has been confirmed that there is genetic component to depression. But then, those genetic problems are still undergoing studies. And there is no doubt at all. What we know, the epigenetic effects are more. That is the environmental effects on the person and how the thing had graduated into throwing the person into that kind of bad mood. And like Abdul Malik said, the bad mood will have to be sustained every day for a minimum of 2 weeks. So we have both the genetic component and also the external component, which is mainly epigenetic. And also the happenings around us that we may not have picked from our parents, which is purely exogenous. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Matthias Oyigea. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Let's now come to the Abuja studios with clinical psychologist Chinyere Udensi. Chinyere, tell us, clinical depression, what triggers it?
So many things can trigger clinical depression, like we've heard the other speakers talk about. There is the biological component to it, and then there is the environmental component. The environmental component, you find it to be one of the biggest contributing factor. So people can go through severe loss, severe traumatic experiences, and that could be a trigger for it. Financial struggles, emotional struggles, things like bullying at school, and when they lose their jobs. So when people go through severe emotional trauma or emotional pain, it can lead them down a path of depression. Also, when people are struggling to perhaps do the things that they find that people in their circle are doing, and they may feel that they're not capable, that could lead them down a path of feeling like they have having a low mood and perhaps eliciting depression. So anything actually could be a triggering factor for most people to experience depression.
Now, how do we differentiate between feeling sad or feeling blue or unhappy from clinical depression?
Yeah. So everybody has those moments that we feel down. We all have the moments where we feel sad, and we all have the moments where we just don't want to do anything and we just don't feel like talking to anybody. But the difference between the everyday mood of sadness and clinical depression is the severity and intensity. When it comes to that one, you find that it begins to affect the person's ability to function every day. It begins to affect your ability to go to school, to keep your relationships, to go to work. You might find that you're not even concentrating at work. You don't don't just want to do anything. And because it can last for up to 2 weeks, that's quite a big chunk of someone's monthly activity. The severity can make you just not want to do anything. And for some people, 2 weeks is even just a little bit. It can go for as long as a month. So we use 2 weeks as a benchmark to see, to actually measure the intensity and severity. But when you begin to find that it's affecting your ability to function, to carry out your daily activities, to do the things that you usually do, then we can begin to say we can look into diagnosing the person. And that's the sharp difference between everyday feeling sad and a clinical depression.
Okay, thank you, Chinyere. Let's return to Dr. Jibril Abdul Malik in our Ibadan Network Center. Dr. Abdul Malik, who is susceptible to clinical depression? And is there necessarily a dichotomy between the sexes in who is more likely to get depressed?
Right, thank you very much. Let me start by saying that everybody can be depressed. The same way everybody can be involved in a road traffic accident. There is no human being that can beat his or her chest and say that they are immune to suffering from depression. Indeed, some people usually have the erroneous impression that it is only those to whom something bad has happened to that should become depressed. But that's not true. You find people who apparently outwardly appear very successful and they still suffer from depression. We've had international journalists like Anthony Bourdain of CNN suffer from depression and eventually end his life via suicide. We've had entertainers like Robin Williams, who made other people laugh, himself suffer from depression. So it's not only when bad things happen or when you are suffering or you lose your job. Of course, that is a stressor that may increase your risk of suffering from depression. But the bottom line is that everybody can suffer from depression regardless of your socioeconomic status, your level of education, whether you are married or you are single, whether you are gainfully employed or not employed. Anybody can suffer from depression. However, we know that some risk factors increase the vulnerability of some people towards developing depression. And one of those risk factors is what you mentioned, gender. What we know for depression is that it is twice as common among females as it is in males. So females are more at risk of developing depression as compared to males. But that's not to say that males do not also get depressed, just that the prevalence is higher in females compared to males. Okay, so that's one. The second is that a family history of depression, and I would like to quickly add here that when we say family history, it's not an automatic thing that once, for instance, both my parents had depression, I will automatically have depression. No, it's just a risk factor, similar to hypertension and diabetes. If your parents have hypertension and diabetes, what it means is that you are at higher risk of developing it. But you can live up to 100 and not become hypertensive or become diabetic if you watch your diet, you exercise, and so on. So depression is similar, that when there is a family history, it means your risk is higher than the average person who does not have family history. But that's not to say that automatically you will develop depression. The other things that increase the risk of depression is having a lot of stressors, negative life events, losing financial losses, loss of loved ones, and so on. So when you have a cluster of many risk factors and you have a risk, familiar risk to it, then your chances will be higher than the other person. But anybody can develop depression. Thank you.
All right, thank you indeed. And back to Dr. Matthias Oyigea. Let me ask you this. What ideas are on the horizon for a better and effective ways to treat depression, especially clinical depression?
There are so many ways to treat clinical depression, but once somebody is depressed, confirmed depressed, we first of all stabilize the person because it has to do with mood. So hospitalization or hospital treatment is the first thing, and that is using drugs for treatment of depression. When a person comes up, you can now go into the areas of psychological treatment. Depending on the aspects the person was most affected, you decide on the pattern of treatment. For example, children, that may have affected their cognitive senses. That is the ability to read, to be in school and concentrate. Then cognitive therapy will be given to such a person, both by the psychiatrist and also the psychologist. If the family dynamics are problems to the child or to the individual, maybe wife or husband, then family therapy will have to come in there. And also, if the person is having issues at work with colleagues or other relations at home, maybe husband relations or wife relations, then we talk about interpersonal therapy. And if the depression, going back again to hospital therapy, the depression is so much that the person cannot even take drugs, because a lot of them may be so bad that they wouldn't take even tablets. At that time, electroconvulsive therapy may be considered to bring the person back to good mood before any other therapy can start. So there are so many ways you can handle clinical depression, but it's individualized. As individuals come in, you assess the person, you rate the person, and then, based on clinical acumen and extant principles, you can decide to take up the person along a line of treatment. I think that's just a highlight to how somebody with clinical depression can be treated. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Matthias. Let me return very quickly again to Dr. Abdul Malik before we come back to Chinyere here in the Abuja studios. Dr. Abdul Malik, I recall that we've had you on several occasions on Good Morning Nigeria discussing issues around mental health, suicide, and so on and so forth. Now you have indicated that depression is one of the commonest public health problems. In Nigeria, do we accord this recognition of a mental health, a public health issue? And if we do, what are the indicators that indeed we are well on the path to dealing with it, either through curative or other therapeutic measures?
Thank you very much. I would like to state that we are not according, not just depression, mental health issues generally, we are not according it the right priority in Nigeria. When we have episodic flare-ups, for instance, there was the codeine issue in Kano some time ago with a BBC documentary, and suddenly there was a task force on drug abuse and all of that, and after that it all fizzled out. Mental health should be given priority because the WHO's definition of health is complete physical, mental, and social well-being. So health is three things: physical health, mental health, and social well-being. So what that means is that mental health is like 1/3 of health generally. But what we find is that even the societal awareness around mental health issues, most people still think that it's a spiritual problem and so on. And that's why what we do, for instance, at the Asidor Foundation is to promote awareness, reduce shame and stigma, and encourage people to come forward for treatment. But that's just advocacy and public awareness. On the part of the government, there needs to be a strategic plan. There is a mental health policy, but that is poorly implemented. It was first developed in 1991. It was revised in 2013, but there is no plan accompanying it. you need an implementation plan. That's one. The mental health laws that we are using in Nigeria is still the Lunacy Act of 1958. It's a shame and a source of embarrassment. However, we have a proactive Senate Committee on Health as well as the National House Committee on Health. The Senate Committee Chairman, Senator Dr. Olori Egbe, has been pushing a revised mental health bill that will accord mental health its right position of recognition and governmental attention so that we're not operating an obsolete law. So there are a lot of things. And in terms of manpower, we are also grossly deficient. We have just about 300 psychiatrists in the country. We have even fewer clinical psychologists working in government institutions in terms of teaching hospitals, psychiatric hospitals. So we have a gross acute shortage of manpower to address the fact that mental health problems are rising globally as well as in Nigeria. We are increasingly seeing a lot of suicide deaths. Okay, so we need to do much more. We need to realize that this is a public health emergency. So this should be a wake-up call. So I'm really delighted that you asked this question, and I hope that NTA and other media will focus attention and help prompt the government to pay adequate attention to 1/3 of the health of our citizens, which is mental health. Thank you.
Right, yeah, but this is a very good information he just gave, with respect to mental illness in Nigeria and the way mental illness is graded in this country with respect to also the way and manner it's graduated for Nigeria to pay attention to what you refer to as a 1/3 of health issues in Nigeria. Now back to Chinyere. Chinyere, now there is psychological intervention and there is antidepressant treatment for depression. Which one would you subscribe to? Or do you have to evaluate a depressed person to determine which aspect of treatment will be administered?
Yeah. So the treatment for depression is first of all individualized. There really isn't any general treatment form. But we know that there's a psychotherapy, which is a talk therapy with a psychologist or a counselor, and then we have the medication aspect to it. So how do we go about deciding who gets what? It all stems down to assessment. So the individual, when you talk to the individual and you realize perhaps the severity or the intensity of their diagnosis, you can now decide the approach to go with. My approach as a psychologist is purely talk therapy. I don't dispense medication. So what I would do is, if I have a client who comes and they're quite clinically depressed, I would now refer to a psychiatrist who I will partner with and have a combined care. So generally the treatment can be therapy and medication, or just therapy, or just medication and then therapy. So it depends on the person and what they're presenting with.
Now, sorry, Christine, what is the response benefit for either treatment or psychological approach?
So it depends on what the person is coming with. If somebody is clinically depressed and when they're clinically depressed, they can't really function properly. So that's not even the best time to talk to them about anything. So then you will start with medication. So they begin to respond and you're able to start to talk to them to address the problem. So again, it now depends on what the person is coming with but we know that a combination care or this or that does have a good effect on the person if they're getting the right treatment.
Okay, Chinyere, thank you very much. Dr. Matthias, once again in Makurdi Network Center, tell us, what options are available for care and treatment of an individual who is clinically depressed? Can there be self-help? I mean, if you know what the triggers are and the individual is capable of talking himself or herself out of the state, can that help? Can that work? What is the role of the family, of next neighbors? And then what will be the role of the specialists? Just as Chinyere was trying to explain, but more particularly, what is the role of the individual first as a response to the clinical depression?
In all mental health issues, The treatment is based on a tripod of the patient, the hospital of which the doctor represents, and the support system. The hospital is there to receive the patient, do assessment, and then prescribe the right treatment for the person to come out of the bad mood. After doing that, it's expected, based on history, that you bring other people into the treatment menu. The family must be there if the person has family, because the person needs support at the end of the treatment. There, I talked earlier about interpersonal therapy. I talked about family therapy. All this, based on history, you may need to bring in the family in the psychotherapy session. You may need to bring some of the peers or colleagues in the office into the therapy. Then, the individual himself must comply with instructions on how to take the drugs, on what to do, so that the person will not go back to the same state. So, if any of these arms fails, the treatment will fail. The patient does not comply with treatment, the depression will come back. If the patient complies with treatment, but the family or the support system fails, the person will not get the kind of support that should sustain the person in the right mood. If the hospital is not paying good attention to the patient, but the support system is strong, the patient is willing, but whenever the person comes to hospital, is not getting enough attention, is not getting enough encouragement, then the treatment will fail. So essentially, the treatment rests on a tripod of the hospital, the support system, and the individual having the illness. The three must work together. Like the psychologist said, sometimes she will work with the doctor. While the doctor is giving drugs, she's also giving the psychotherapy. That is how it should be. All hands must be on deck, positively, to put the person continuously in the right mood. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Matthias Oyigaya, we're going to take a short break now. When we come back, the conversation continues.
Although social media as a channel of communication is inherently harmless, it becomes harmful and damaging when used without discretion and thoughtfulness. Bad social media users spread rumors and fake news without verification. But good social media users stop, reflect, and verify information before sharing it. Be a good social media user. Stop the spread of fake news. Verify the authenticity of your source and use social media responsibly for a better Nigeria. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, in collaboration with the National Orientation Agency.
New edition of TV Guide is out with special focus on the game changer, His Excellency Governor Abdullahi Sule of Nasarawa State. Broadcasting in a digital economy, Maxwell Logo gives an insight. This edition also features Nancy Naji of AIT, a name synonymous with business. Meet the NCDC boss, Dr. Chikwe Ihekweazu. TV Guide, your indispensable companion, also x-rays the relevance of social media in the modern society. Meet some TV professionals who have impacted their spaces and other inspiring stories in sports, entertainment, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
Dialogue, empathy, love, and unity. These are vital components of nation building.
For all to be well, we appeal that we should refrain from volatile, provocative, inciting messages and language.
Let's build and not destroy.
Arsenal will seek revenge against Aston Villa after their loss to their opponents at the Emirates Stadium last time out. Will they succeed, or will Villa do the double over the Gunners this season? Find out this Saturday when Aston Villa welcome Arsenal to Villa Park on the Premier League Live, showing on the NTA network from 1 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Axis Bank, Babai Jebu, Lipton, and Close Up, in association with Goal.com.
All right, it's still Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. I want to return to Chinyere Udensi on the role that the individual can play in dealing with clinical depression. Dr. Matthias was talking about, yes, the patient has a role, the family has a role, and then the hospital or the healthcare professionals also have a role. I'm just talking about the individual who is self-aware. What role can that individual play? And how can that individual tap into the communal system that we have, the support system, either the family or associations by way of churches or mosques or clubs. But what can the individual do for self once there are indications of a depressive state?
A lot of the times, what we do is that we encourage self-care. Self-care, and that encapsulates a lot of the things that we can do. The big word there is awareness, understanding that, okay, these are the things I go through, I'm feeling this way for quite a number of time, or I'm struggling. What you can do, one of the first things that I like to encourage my clients to do when they come is, first of all, identify your triggers. If you're able to know the things that perhaps take you down a path or make you feel a certain way, identify it. If you need support with walking through those triggers, then you get the support either from your family, from the therapist, from the people that you love the most that you are able to support you. So identify the things that cause you to feel sad or make you feel a certain way and look into them. Another thing that you can do is, with depression, what it does is that it holds you back. It changes your mood. It makes you not want to interact with the people around you. I encourage my clients to do the opposite of how you feel. If you feel sad, just try and get up as much as you can. If you feel that you don't want to go anywhere, just get up and go out. Just don't sit alone. Don't isolate yourself, which is what depression makes people do. Don't get into those habits, because sometimes there's a cognitive part and there's a behavioral part of mental health challenges. So the behavioral part will encourage you to get up and do. And then the cognitive part now gets you to start to think different about a situation that would help you address it. Your support system goes a long way. I want to encourage everybody. Part of self-care is tapping into your support system to help you during your low moments, during the times that you're unable to support yourself. Healthy living, lifestyle changes, incorporating exercise, incorporating medication and meditation, some form of yoga. All these things have a history of helping you lift your mood and making you feel better. A lot of people like to do affirmations. It helps a lot of the times to use affirmations to help yourself. And then, there's so much resources out there that you can go into. Look for a hobby. Find something that you want to do that will make you feel better. Incorporate new things into your life so that you're not allowing that sad feeling or that sad mood hold you back. And if you have done all these things and you're finding that you're still not feeling any better, then please speak to the nearest mental health practitioner, your psychologist, your psychiatrist, that would help you perhaps chart a more structured path to helping you get into a better headspace.
All right, I wish you have time, for us to deliberate on this much more than this. But let's get to Dr. Jibril Abdul Malik. Maybe you have to speak to this. Self-help effort of a depressed person. How much can a depressed person do to help him or herself out of depression? Chinyere has given us a dossier of what could be done. Perhaps you may have to come from another perspective.
Thank you very much. I think in addition to what Chinyere has excellently explained, is perhaps for the individual to also know when the threshold at which point they need to seek for help. And not just the individual alone, those of us, the social circle, there have been research studies globally that have shown that simply having someone check in with you, oh, how are you? I've not seen you in a long time. I just said I should drop in to check on you. Without even formal therapy training, having people check on your well-being, show an interest in your well-being is helpful to improve your mood, exercise, and so on. But the addition I will add, so I don't repeat what Chinyere has already excellently explained, is that if you are doing all of these things and you are still not feeling an improvement in your mood, you are still feeling low, you are still going through a lot of emotional pain, that is the threshold for you to know that you need professional help at that time. And that professional help, you can get it from the mental health professionals. So that's very important. And again, it's very important for the individual to also appreciate that depression sometimes is chronic. It lasts for a long time. It's not like malaria that's for 1 week or a few days and it's gone. Some individuals tend to have what we call recurrent depression. So they go through depression, they come out of it, and then months down the line, a year down the line, the symptoms resurface again. So they need to also be aware of the fact that sometimes it can have this cyclical nature or recurrent nature. And so they need to identify early and then ensure that they put measures in place to lift their mood. They have hobbies that improve them. They have a social support network to lift them up when they are feeling a bit low. All of these are very helpful for the individual.
I was just wondering, Dr. Abdul Malik, very quickly, still on self-help, what is the limit to escape? I know that, alcoholism, of course, poses its own dangers. Somebody is taking to help himself could say, look, I go watch a movie, I go to the stadium to watch a soccer match, I read a book, and all that. Might all of this also help the person get out of a depressive state?
Right. Exercise, enjoying hobbies are helpful. But just as you rightly mentioned, we are wary of turning to unhelpful escape routes. Some individuals, in fact, in our clinical experience, even among young people, what we find, especially among adolescent men, boys, and young men, is that when they present with drug abuse, if you then probe into how did you start, why did you start, you tend to find that at the bottom, underlying issue was that they were feeling very low about themselves. They had low self-esteem. They were going through a depressive phase. They didn't identify it. And then they started self-medicating, taking drugs to make them feel high, to lift their mood, and make themselves feel good about themselves and life generally. And it then led to addiction. So the primary problem that started, which was missed, was depression. And they were only using the drug abuse to try and get out of the depression, thereby creating another entirely big problem for themselves, which is drug addiction. So we don't want you to self-console with drugs, with alcohol, with cannabis, with medications generally. That is not helpful. That is leading into another cul-de-sac entirely. So that's not helpful. But things like exercise, watching movies, reading books, playing games, those are very helpful ways to try and improve your mood. Visiting friends, people that you know will make you happy, all of those are very helpful. Thank you.
All right, and thank you indeed, Dr. Jibril Abdul Malik, for your contribution this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. You are the founder and CEO at CIDO Foundation. Thank you indeed for sharing your thoughts with us. And of course, here in the studio, we have Chinyere Udensi, clinical psychologist, NIM Foundation. Thank you, Chinyere.
Thank you for having me.
Coming. And of course, Dr. Matthias Oyigea, former Chief Medical Director, Federal Medical Center, Makurdi, Benue State. He is also a consultant psychiatrist. Thank you for coming this morning on our show.
All right, just before we go, if we still have enough time, we'll take sports.